And this all comes to root, as Raleigh was talking about, Vern Benston. This comes to root in transmission. No one's writing, almost no one is writing about it. Vern Benston's done this wonderful book. 40 years, he stayed with the same families as they grew and added people and the rest up to 5, 6 generations out. And he wanted to know how they transmitted religion at home, in family and extended families. So what's fascinating about it is, how do you get to practice and believe? And if you go left to right in terms of the strength of the influence, you see some influences from historical events, generational differences, but they're more at the fringe. Even us, churches, priests, ministers, Christian educators, religious influences, that's still out a bit in terms of its influence. What's close in? Family, parents, grandparents. See, it's not a big surprise when the National Study on Youth and Religion is done, Christian Smith and those studies over now almost 20 years of looking at youth and now young adults' religious practice. It's not a surprise that the groups who are the most highly religious teenagers and young adults are Mormons and African American young people in historically black churches. It's no surprise, because both of those emphasize this part of the model. Family religious inheritance, religious tradition the child is born into, very conscious religious tradition as opposed to a no religious tradition. Parents involved in church, the only predictor of children participating in Sunday worship is that the parents participate. It's the only predictor. There isn't any other one even close. If moms and dads and grandmas and grandpas and aunts and uncles and godparents go and they bring the kids with them, that's how you establish church going. There's just nothing else even close to it. And the parents of a same faith relationship. Now, at least in my world, the Roman Catholic world, where I spend some time anyway when they have me, half of all Roman Catholics marry somebody who's not Roman Catholic. And only a third of Roman Catholics who marry get married in a church. If you don't get married in a church, you've decreased the chances you're going to bring your child to be baptized in a church, which decreases the chance you're going to transmit a religious faith at home, which means there's very little chance they're going to be back for First Communion. You see, when you're a life cycle church, Episcopalians, Roman Catholics, Lutherans, when you're a life cycle church, you depend on transmission. And you depend on life cycle rituals to kick the process off. When those don't work effectively, the whole system falls out. And in my world, I spoke to a group of family life people. They were really thrilled with my statistics, you can imagine. Especially the ones about family. And I said, my advice to you is get Catholics to marry Catholics now. It's what a Jewish rabbi might say to his congregation, to his, get Jews to marry Jews. That's our future. Well, it's true for everybody. It's not just Jewish. Grandparent influence. This book is huge on the impact of grandparents. Huge. As significant people. Now, again, what do you see in historically black churches? What do you see in the Mormons? Grandparents have a very active role in faith formation. When they wouldn't even call it faith formation, just faith forming.
Remember the Hispanic church?
Hispanic church and Latino church, absolutely. Yes. Parents role modeling at church or synagogue involvement. Home prayer and instruction are the two things that Christian Smith always identifies as reading the Bible and praying together. Starts at home. And the parent-child relationship. The more warm, affirming, and authoritative, the more faith is transmitted. The more cold, distant, and authoritarian, the less faith is transmitted. So even though the numbers I gave you about religious transmission were not, the clues in this study of what we could be doing is just amazing. But it's a shift in our thinking. So far, so good? If your church is somewhat like the church I grew up in, this story will resonate. I grew up in an Italian National Catholic parish in Bridgeport, Connecticut. And there were only 6 last names in the whole parish. because they came from 3 towns in Italy. Okay? They built the church, made sure they got an Italian Monsignor to be the pastor. The primary language was Italian, Latin on Sunday, English eventually. My church, and there was another Italian church in Bridgeport. It was across town. It was for Sicilians. They're really not Italian, so they had another church. They're Sicilians. There was no diversity in my church. They were all Italians. They were from 3 towns in Italy. They shared a common story. They came on the same boat. Holy Rosary Church closed 10 years ago, like a year after its 100th anniversary. All the Italians had moved out, the neighborhood had changed, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. The church is closed. It's a beautiful church, but it's closed. And in that one little story is a church that couldn't adapt. Because the neighborhood changed, became much more diverse. They weren't all Italians anymore. But it was a church built for homogeneity, not heterogeneity. And every church in America finds itself in a world of diversity, and you've seen all these diversities. That's a huge challenge for churches and for faith formation. Huge. Huge.